both here and globally. But I want to be crystal clear. We are prepared. Indeed, one of the great strengths of this nation is our ability to keep a cool head. Nothing else will guide me. That is my focus. And clearly there will be an economic impact from the decisions that the US has taken. I said that in my first speech as Prime Minister, and that is how I govern. That is how we have planned, and that is exactly what is required today.
While Britain faces an economic crisis, Keir Starmer has found his perfect scapegoat, Donald Trump's 10% tariff. But is this genuinely about protecting British workers, or simply another attempt to shift blame from his failing policies? The timing couldn't be more convenient for Starmer.
I understand how important this is for your businesses, as it is for the British people. So we move now to the next stage of our plan. Last night, the President of the United States acted for his country, and that is his mandate. Today, I will act in Britain's interests with mine. Decisions we take in coming days and weeks will be guided only by our national interest, in the interests of our economy, in the interests of businesses around this table.
Just as his government's economic policies come under fire, along comes an external threat to point fingers at. Coincidence? Let's examine what Starmer's actually saying versus what his government is doing. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
Negotiations on an economic prosperity deal, one that strengthens our existing trading relationship, they continue, and we will fight for the best deal for Britain. Nobody wins in a trade war. That is not in our national interest. We have a fair and balanced trade relationship with the US. Nonetheless, I want to be clear. I will only strike a deal if it is in our national interest, and if it is the right thing to do for the security of working people.
Well, isn't this convenient timing for Sir Keir Starmer? Just as his government's economic policies were starting to come under serious scrutiny, along comes Donald Trump with tariff threats that provide the perfect scapegoat. Make no mistake, these tariffs would indeed hurt British workers, but they're far from the root of Britain's economic troubles. Let's talk about the remarkable timing. Starmer's approval ratings have been in freefall since July, with YouGov polling showing a dramatic 21-point drop in just 4 months. The economic indicators were flashing red well before Trump mentioned tariffs, stagnant growth, persistent inflation affecting everyday essentials, and public services hanging by a thread after 14 years of austerity that Starmer has shown little interest in reversing. But listen to Starmer's rhetoric now. Nobody wins in a trade war, he declares solemnly, while simultaneously vowing to fight for British interests and secure a deal. These statements reveal a calculated contradiction. If no one wins a trade war, what exactly is he fighting for? And more importantly, what leverage does he believe he possesses in these negotiations? The Prime Minister's language choices are particularly telling. Every statement frames Britain as the victim, every problem as externally imposed. We face unprecedented challenges from abroad, he insists, conveniently sidestepping the domestic policy decisions that have left British workers vulnerable in the first place. There's a stark difference between how he addresses the tariff issue and how he dismisses domestic concerns about the cost of living crisis. The former gets righteous indignation, the latter gets patronising lectures about economic reality. This pattern becomes even more apparent when we examine Starmer's track record on worker protections. Despite campaign promises to strengthen employment rights, his government has already begun watering down proposals. The much-touted Employment Rights Bill has been delayed repeatedly, while corporations continue to enjoy tax advantages that his Labour predecessors would have found unconscionable. What's Starmer's actual plan beyond stern words and emergency meetings? His government remains frustratingly light on details. There's no comprehensive trade strategy, no articulation of what specific protections he seeks for British industries, and certainly no acknowledgement that his own government's fiscal policies might be exacerbating economic vulnerabilities. The irony shouldn't be lost on anyone that Brexit, which Starmer opposed, might actually provide Britain with flexibility in this situation that EU member states lack. individual negotiations outside the EU framework could potentially yield sector-specific protections that a bloc-wide approach couldn't achieve. Yet Starmer seems reluctant to acknowledge this possible advantage, perhaps because it contradicts his previous position. That reluctance to acknowledge Brexit advantages perfectly encapsulates Starmer's entire response to the Trump tariff situation. Have you noticed how fighting for British workers sounds impressive until you ask the simple question, fighting with what? When we examine what's actually behind Starmer's bold declarations, we find something far more troubling than political posturing. Let's look at what Starmer has actually proposed to counter Trump's tariff threats. The uncomfortable answer is nothing specific whatsoever. No targeted diplomacy strategy, no sector protection plan, no detailed economic countermeasures, just vague promises to secure a deal without explaining how he plans to achieve this against an administration known for its uncompromising negotiation style. This empty response makes even less sense when you consider the EU's previous experience with Trump-era tariffs. In 2018, when Trump imposed steel and aluminum tariffs, the EU responded with targeted countermeasures on American products like bourbon, motorcycles, and jeans, hitting politically sensitive regions. Starmer has proposed no such strategy, despite the UK theoretically having greater flexibility to tailor its response as a post-Brexit nation. Starmer's negotiation track record offers little comfort. His approach to the Northern Ireland Protocol showed a willingness to accept unfavourable terms rather than engage in the hard work of negotiation. This pattern suggests he lacks either the skill or inclination to stand firm when facing pressure from stronger economic powers, precisely what would be needed with Trump. The cabinet he's assembled further undermines his worker protection claims. His Chancellor Rachel Reeves, a former Bank of England economist, has consistently prioritised business interests over labour concerns. His Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds has no significant record of challenging corporate power. These appointments reveal Starmer's true priorities, maintaining establishment economic structures rather than protecting vulnerable workers. What would effective leadership actually look like in this situation? It would start with specific sector-by-sector impact analyses. It would include targeted diplomatic engagement with key US congressional leaders from districts dependent on UK trade. It would involve coordination with other affected nations without surrendering sovereignty, and it would mean honest communication with the British public about challenges ahead. Instead, Starmer offers hollow rhetoric designed to create the appearance of action while committing to nothing. His promises to fight for British interests are politically convenient phrases that provide cover for inaction, allowing him to claim he tried his best when the inevitable economic pain arrives. Looking at the bigger picture, what we're witnessing with Starmer isn't just a botched response to Trump's tariff threats, it's a masterclass in political misdirection. While he publicly positions himself as our economic champion, his actions tell a completely different story. For British workers facing the harsh realities of stagnant wages and rising costs, Starmer's empty rhetoric offers nothing of substance. This manufactured crisis management reveals his true priorities, protecting his political image rather than protecting livelihoods. As this economic storm intensifies, voters must ask themselves, is Starmer actually representing their interests? Or is he merely performing the role while serving entirely different masters?